Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and this is a bit of a supplemental, very much unscripted. This one, I'm going to discuss the ins and outs of the remarks yesterday by a Labour MP, Dawn Butler, who referred to Boris Johnson as a liar in the House of Commons, and as a result, because she wouldn't withdraw the remark or apologise or anything like that, she had to leave the House of Commons, all standard procedure. But what I'm going to do in this one is to discuss some of the things that some people may not be taking into account. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I'm going to try and not waffle on and on and on with this one. It's very, very hot. I haven't now got time to get it all down, which is what I would like to do. But, so, situation, Labour backbencher, absolutely frustrated, perfectly understandable, and I fully support the statement, but not necessarily what people think should be the follow-on, which is to call Boris Johnson out for his lying. She's not the first person to do this. Ian Blackford actually quite famously got away with it because he didn't call Boris Johnson a liar, he just asked if he was a liar. Most MPs get this point across, like Starmer, by pointing out the lies without calling him a liar. There's lots of people calling for Labour to just take a lead on this and to just do this. And I can absolutely see it. And I'm going to try and see have a think in this video if there is a way of realistically doing it. Because some people may think, well, let's have a Spartacus moment. Labour MPs, whenever they get up to say anything, just say, Boris Johnson is a liar. Would I like to reflect on that? No, Boris Johnson is a liar. You stop him lying and I'll stop calling him a liar. Oh, I've got to leave the chamber? All right, then next Labour MP to speak does the same thing. Keep doing it and doing it and doing it until something is forced to be changed. However, it's not as simple as that. First of all, let me explain why the rule is in place. So why is it that you cannot call an MP a liar even when they so clearly are? And it's very much around parliamentary privilege. An MP in Parliament can basically say whatever they like. I'll come to the fact that they can't say whatever they like about other MPs in a moment. They can say whatever they like, completely free of being... So they could stand up in Parliament and accuse someone or a business, for example, of some dodgy practice. And let's say it wasn't correct. So let's say they basically slandered someone. They're not getting sued for it. They would be expected to correct the record if they're wrong about what they said. They would be expected to correct the record, but they can't be sued. Parliamentary privilege. So now imagine, because all the rules, the only rules about what an MP can and can't say is to do with what's called parliamentary language. Obviously, you don't use offensive terms. Jacob Rees-Mogg used a racist term recently for which he didn't really apologise. He just said, also, I don't know what it means. I mean, yeah, I know he's ignorant, but he tries to give the impression he understands words. So really. But so you can't obviously use offensive terms and you can't disparage other members. Now, imagine the scenario if that rule wasn't there. MPs would get up and just make up scurrilous lies about MPs on the opposite side of the House. Just make them up. What would stop them? The answer is nothing at all. Parliamentary privilege. You know, you could stand up and tell the most terrible lies about MPs on the other side of the House. It would all be reported in the news. And normally you'd think to yourself, but if it's a lie, you can take them to court. You can't take them to court. So the reason why the rule there is clear. That being said, a huge hole in this is what happens when you have a very prominent MP, the Prime Minister himself, who just lies and lies and tells the most blatant lies. And yes, politicians are not the most honest bunch, but in the past, when they've been caught out in the lies and in the House have been cross-examined, they have been forced to correct the record. Boris Johnson doesn't. He brazens it out. Something has to change. It cannot keep going on, which is why I do support what Dawn Butler said. And I would support other backbench MPs from doing the same thing. But here is the problem, where if the Labour leadership took a general view of doing this, because you could say, you know, that Keir Starmer should do the same thing, and then David Lammy should do the same thing, and Jonathan Ashworth should do the same thing, and Angela Rayner should do the same thing, and so on and so on. The problem is how it gets played out in the media. You've got to bear in mind there's one rule for Labour and one rule for the Conservatives in terms of how things are reported to the people. So Labour do that, and there's a couple of major downsides, but I made the point on Twitter, for example. Labour are at the moment trying to keep pointing out that the Tories do not follow the rules. You know, they have no respect for the rules. You somewhat undermine that argument if you then, in a very blatant way that is recorded very clearly, break the rules of your own parliament. So that is one huge risk to it. If that was all there was to it, I would say I think it's worth the risk. But it's not all there is to it, and there is potentially a more cunning way this could proceed. It won't, but there is potentially a more cunning way. The other problem is this. So what happens... So in theory, I'll tell you what I wouldn't at all mind seeing. I'm not going to say I would like to see because I'm thinking ahead. But what I wouldn't mind seeing is more of a show of this. Maybe MPs from across different parties. I wouldn't expect Conservative MPs to do this, but maybe across different parties. MPs, when they get to ask their question, saying Boris Johnson is a liar. Ask their question and say, you know, could the Prime Minister, who is a liar, tell me that, or something? Just add something in. So you're still asking your question. You probably won't get it answered, but you call him a liar and you keep doing it and doing it. What happens when someone keeps repeating a misdemeanor? Like the first time, it's set down what the procedure is. You're told to leave the chamber. If you keep doing it and you keep doing it, what eventually could happen is you could be found in contempt of Parliament. You could be banned from Parliament for a period of time. Now, if that happens, that MP in their constituency, their constituents would be allowed, if they're suspended for more than a certain period of time, which if they keep doing it, inevitably they would be. Remember who's in charge here. Remember who's going to vote on whether MPs are in contempt of Parliament. Conservative MPs. And if it's above a certain period, I forget what it is now, maybe 2 weeks or something, their constituents are allowed to trigger a recall. If 10% of the constituents sign this petition, that MP is no longer an MP. They lose their job as an MP. Now, there'll be a by-election and they're allowed to stand again and they may win. But what you're talking about here, if you want MPs to do this, Labour MPs to do this, you're triggering lots and lots of Labour by-elections for which, at best, they can win it back. But every time you have a by-election, you risk losing it. Is that worth it? Because this does no harm to Boris Johnson. Because the way, I'll tell you the way it'll be played out in the press, the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, the Times even, the Daily Telegraph, I'll tell you how it'll play out. They will point to the fact that the Nazi Party did the same thing. Not the same thing literally, but the fact that they used to disrupt proceedings in the Reichstag. They had no respect for the rules of their parliament and they constantly disrupted them. They would draw those links, you know, in a way that they didn't when it was much more aptly mimicked by the Brexit Party, for example, in the European Parliament. That is how it would play out. So the idea of calling for mass action like this on the part of Labour MPs, that's where it would lead. It would do Boris Johnson no harm at all. In the public, it would be a huge risk. Now, I'm not saying it would ultimately fail, because if it can capture the public imagination, then something could happen. So that's why I say I wouldn't mind seeing that, because it is possible that it could trigger a debate in the wider public, and maybe more people start to see things like Peter Stevanovich's video calling out Boris Johnson's lies. So there is that little island of opportunity where maybe something emerges from it. But as they say, the problem with an island of opportunity is if you miss it, you're pretty much bound. You're falling in the sea. And that is the problem. You know, taking this to its logical conclusion, if it doesn't work, one of two things has to happen. One, MPs will end up being recalled from Parliament and triggering by-elections, which at some point they could lose, and it's just damaging to Labour not to the Conservatives, or they'd have to realise it wasn't working and stop, at which point they've been defeated. And that, again, looks very bad. So this idea about, Starmer should do this and Labour should do this and all the rest of it, and I can totally see what it is. And initially that was my reaction until I thought about it. That's mob mentality. That works for the Conservatives. It doesn't. And it works for a populist government in charge. It doesn't work for a principled opposition. And the idea that the Labour front bench should do this, no. I'll tell you what might work though. Might. If some Labour MPs were willing to take it in turns to do it, not any individual MP do it so often that they'd end up being suspended for an excessive period of time and triggering that recall. But if they were willing to do a round robin, have a coordinated thing where members of the front bench, whoever it is, if it's Starmer at the debate at the dispatch box that day, or Angela Rayner, or whoever is whichever shadow minister is at the dispatch box that day, maybe just making a comment in support of it. They don't have to call Boris Johnson a lie and get removed themselves, because otherwise what happens then? They get removed, their debate's gone. But echo their support for it and say, why don't... Because bear in mind what Dawn Butler, where she went wrong, it's not what she said, it was just calling him a liar. If she'd have made the point, for example, that the Prime Minister has made false statements to the House which he hasn't yet corrected, when is he going to do it? That's totally in order. That's fine. Because he has made false statements to the House. Because you can always argue they're inadvertent. We know they're not. Everyone knows they're not. But that's all in order. And you can ask quite reasonably when the record is going to be corrected. So what I would suggest, if they're willing, backbenchers make a show of this and get in the liar thing for the press, for the media. Front bench to say, might we ask when the Prime Minister is going to correct the record? Because that would solve the whole problem. And so supporting each other in that way. But this is why you have to be very, very careful to just go, oh, well, Boris Johnson isn't playing by the rules, so we're justified in doing this. It's like, yeah, you're justified. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, who's going to lose out if we go with the mob mentality? Labour lose out. Those Labour MPs lose out. Some of them will lose their jobs. And these principled people who are standing up and speaking truth to power, as they would say, and I'm not going to disagree with it on this occasion, will no longer be a member of Parliament. And that doesn't hurt Boris Johnson in the slightest. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.